I can't say much, obviously, and how it was done, but you know, we knew everything that was going on in and out of that airport. We knew exactly how it was going to happen. The VIP SUVs show up. This flight comes in around midnight on January 2nd. Individual gets off, gets in the black SUV, goes the route somewhere along the lines of Route Irish, which is outside of Baghdadi airport, which during the Iraq War was heavily targeted by insurgents. It was only fitting that the finish happened there. You know, I was watching the ISR bird, and then I saw it lock on, and then seconds later, it friggin' turns the SUV into twisted metal AGM 114, you know, right through the dead center of it. And my buddy pats me on the back. He goes, "Congratulations, you just bagged." That kind of gets lost in the noise, right? And I think the point that you're really trying to bring up with a lot of my stories is that there's so much of special forces that happens quietly behind the scenes that isn't the big sexy raid, isn't, you know, kicking in doors all the time. A lot of it is, you know, quietly maneuvering intelligence assets, intelligence sharing, coordination, you know, with other people. You're always working with somebody else. You know, you're working with the host nation, you're working what you get. So come back to the pirate ship, right? The pirate ship analogy. You know, you're in the ship with the pirates and you're working with what you got, right? You know, Chuck Ritter, love that guy. So I'll give you two stories with that. You know, one is working bilaterally, one is working bilaterally, but more in a unilateral sense. So it's like the first story would be, again, back to the Philippines. We were trying to kill Marwan. So I'm sitting at this meeting, right? And like so many Green Berets that have done this raid before, you know, attempted this raid before. Marwan was located in the SPMS box. And it's a marshy area. It's very difficult to get into. So, you know, here I am sitting at this meeting. We're all trying to figure out how to crack this nut. I'm the assault force, right? I'm basically one of the assault force commanders or ground force commander. We had, it was going to be a joint effort between the AFP and the PNP, Philippines National Police, Armed Forces of the Philippines. I was the AFP side on this particular deployment. And we're sitting there. We got our Joseph J2, who's the main intel guy supporting all our operations. And then we had, on the Philippine side, we had Nika, right? So basically the Filipino CIA. And they had an asset that was going to walk us on to that objective. And, you know, to get, you know, we're all sitting down trying to crack this nut, you know, talking about how bad this could go, you know, because surrounding him was a couple hundred fighters that if they hear something pop off, they hear the AFP or the PNP rolling around, they're going to show up in force.
And that's good. Yeah.
And so fast forward a few years, probably 8 months after this deployment, I'm at the 18 Fox course at Fort Bragg. Mama Sapano happens. So Mama Sapano was probably one of the darkest days in the Philippine National Police history. And they lost 44 guys that day, but they got Marwan.
Well, it was an operation to get him and just...
It went awry, I guess you could say. So they lost 44 guys on this. Terrible, terrible tragedy, but they finally did get him and did kill him after all these years. And I was fortunate enough to 2 years after that, year and a half later, I'm back in the Philippines. I'm working with, you know, one of the survivors of that raid. And I remember, you know, building this, you know, having, you know, attempted to do this raid. You know, we get out, we get to LCC, we're going to pull a trigger. And then it's like, oh, we're compromised. Right. And then once you're compromised, you know, you're going to stir the hornet's nest. And that's basically what happened at Mama Sapano. I don't know all the details, right? Obviously, it's like more of my knowledge is from, you know, Green Berets that were downrange at the time, you know, telling me kind of, you know, basically how I told it, how it went down. And so like, fast forward 18, a year and a half later, I'm back there and I'm working with the PMP SAF, Philippine National Police Special Action Force. And, a lot of the things that we do behind the scenes, it's like I said, it's like, foreign internal defense, building capacity, giving them the confidence to go out there and do it on themselves. They don't have all these whiz bang tech stuff. They don't have Palantir. They don't have, all these tools and shit. Right. And honestly, like I'm like kind of old school, right? You have this thing called a MCOO, Military Combined Obstacle Overlay, right? Very basic thing that you learn in mission planning. And so you kind of like, you put all your knowns on there. You put where the enemy is, you put where you are, you're analyzing key terrain, stuff like that. And a lot of what these units they couldn't do is visualize their intelligence. So what I did for them, it was real funny. It was Ray Areno. I'll never forget it. And I kept I was training their operators, right? And I was training them on how to take their intelligence, right? Because they were developing target packets. And so targeting specific individuals with crimes, terrorist groups, etc. And basically said, hey, all right, take this intelligence, put it on a map. This is how you do it. Using PowerPoint. That's it, right? Using PowerPoint, something that was free.
Yeah.
And they all had computer access in some way, shape, or form. And I made them basically, I taught them how to create a target packet. And they didn't think that I was going to have their commander come in and start approving missions. Well, I didn't know that this was going to happen, but this is just kind of one of those accidental good things that happen. And so they all present their target packets to the commander. And he's like, why haven't I heard this? So Ray Areno is like, why haven't I heard this? Filipino bravado on full display. I can't get over this. We need to action this tonight. And so he starts making phone calls and, speaking Tagalog, angry Tagalog into the phone and spitting stuff up. And I think like that night, like they ended up rolling up like 20 dudes. Yeah. And the next day he gives me a plaque and he's like, thank you so much. Right. I still have it to this day. And I'm like, dude, all I did was I just showed your guys how to put shit on PowerPoint, dude, like it was that easy. It's that easy.
Where's the military budget going to? PowerPoint. A lot of PowerPoint.
Yeah. And it's nothing complicated. And here's even, some a little bit more behind the scenes stuff, but we were tracking this ISIS guy. He was moving drone parts out of Hong Kong through Malaysia to the Middle East to support ISIS operations. And we were tracking this guy and we had a fix on him. So there's something called F3AD, find, fix, finish, exploit, assess, disseminate. And in counterterrorism, it's kind of like the holy grail of targeting, right? This is how we do it. You find the guy, you get a fix on him, you go in the finish force, you go in, smash it with a hammer, airstrike, something like that. And then you do site exploitation. So you either get you get cell phones, you get more clues to, where else the network is or who the next person in the food chain is. And then the cycle repeats itself until you completely decimate the network. So this particular guy, we had a fix on him in Kuala Lumpur. And we're like, shit, we're all the way in Oki. And we have like we have one dude that's working in the embassy that we know. We're like, how do we do this? And so we're like, all right, we'll coordinate with station, right? Or we'll figure something out with CIA's got to know somebody, right, or something like that. They got liaison and shit. And so we're like, hey, we have this really bad dude we really want, because no one over, they're focused on bigger picture stuff. We're trying to clean up the ISIS trash in Asia. And so we're like, hey, we want to kill us. Well, we want to get this guy. Well, it just so happens hours before that, Kim Jong-un assassinated his brother in the Kuala Lumpur airport.
Oh,
yeah. So if you're coming up there talking about counterterrorism, get the fuck out of here, dude. We don't care about that right now. We got, North Korea just killed, the leader of North Korea just assassinated his brother.
An absurd. That was like a Cold War type assassination too. That one was absurd. So yeah, I can see what that would.
Yeah, and unbeknownst to us, that just happened, but needless to say, we're still, focused on getting him, and then eventually, he was rolled up in Nepal. Mm-hmm. For however reason, he got spooked. Then he ran to Nepal. Eventually, through liaison, we got him. But that's like kind of. A lot of that isn't sexy, but a lot of it is like making a phone call. And I was talking to you, we were talking offline, and kind of like, when you're in this like in between, you're a spy, you're doing intel stuff. A lot of it is coordination. A lot of it is talking with people, but it's also like, Green Beret, knowing what the customer wants, understanding counterterrorism, understanding the pace of operations, F3AD cycle, having done it myself on an ODA, done it on deployments. Now marrying the two, mm-hmm. right, is kind of what makes it a little more dangerous. But also, it's like work smarter, not harder, dude.
Yeah.
Right. So post deployment after Iraq, I'm in my last operational assignment. I have someone I'm working with. They're coming up to me and they're like, "Hey, we have this sarin gas, we have like a sizable amount of sarin gas we found in Iraq." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, that's not good. I mean, I don't know shit about WMDs, but I know, I've seen the movie The Rock, like VX gas, sarin gas, all that. I'm like, that's not good, man. That's not good at all. And so I literally, I'm like this
20
is
years too late.
Yeah, exactly. But, I'm like, they can weaponize it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's very lethal. So I'm like, this is a phone call. I call a bullpen where I used to work when I was in Iraq,
mm-hmm.
a little bullpen of operators. And, someone on the other line picks up and they see my number. They're like, who the fuck, typical bunch of SF guys. Who the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, what's up? It's Dave Fielding. He's like, Dave Fielding, what shit are you peddling now, bud? Right. And, we're talking shit going back and forth. And I was like, so, hey man, I got, some sarin gas. Do you care about that? He's like, depends how much are we talking here? I was like, I don't know. We got some images, I can send them over to you. He's like, sure, maybe I'll take a look at it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. And I'm like, all right, well, fuck you too, bud. And, I hang up and, they're all looking at me like, what the hell just happened? I was like, hey, we're just going to send it over to them. They, they'll probably flex some recon on it and we'll see from there. They're like, did we just enable a real world operation? I'm like, yeah, you did.
Yep.
Yeah, you did. It was that easy. And we didn't even have to leave. Like, so
let's go get lunch.
Let's go get lunch. It's time for Dunkin', at this point, and it's just, there's so much shit like that happens. It's such a mean machine. But the thing is that when you go out there, you operate, you're at the ground level, who the conduits are to make shit happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to go through, it's faster to go from point A to point B in a straight line than go up the respective hierarchy in the organization, then over and then back down.
Yep.
Because I know I'm like, hey, this was one of their priorities. Beep, boop, beep, beep, beep. Quick phone call, done deal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, it's like what we talked about earlier. It's being right place, right time.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it isn't any different from the business community and networking. You build up a network.
Understanding people.
Yep. The one biggest thing that we talk about as spies is what's in it for me? What's the PT buff?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with this person, how do I PT buff them? Put the benefit up front,
mm-hmm.
And they're thinking from the frame of reference of what's in it for me. So it's like, I'm packaging this up that here's what, remember that thing you said to me? Well, here's one thing. Here's what you get out of it. So same thing, making that phone call to that guy, like, hey, do you care about sarin gas? I know it's, I knew it was one of their lines of effort, right? And you have all these different lines of effort that, counterterrorism, counter ISIS, this, that, and everything, counter proliferation and weapons of mass destruction. So sarin gas falls under I don't know which type, but CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. It's been a while, you
Yeah.
know, but I haven't used that acronym in quite some time. But, you know, those are all priorities of others. So knowing, you know, what people's priorities are and being able to, you know, call them up with opportunity, you know, to make some shit happen, it's an easy day.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a beautiful thing too, to be able to make it that, like, make such an impact from just a phone call.
Yeah. And that's really it. And people don't, you know, people are out there operating, doing America, but then, you know, they have something, they just don't know where to connect it to. And the more field experience you have, the more, you know, time on the ground that you have, the increases your capacity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was definitely a career field guy. You know, don't pull me out of the field, man. Like, you know, so because of shit like that. You know, if I was in a you know, a regular dusty leadership position, you know, what good am I in the mission?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
so I guess we've been hinting at it throughout part one, and then even right now. And, you know, we'll be able to tie everything together, but you obviously had the opportunity to move into a very complex and unique line of work with a very specialized group. Are you able to speak to what that transition ended up looking like when that first came onto your radar after, you know, you've been operating in the Philippines, as we just discussed?
So I was, you know, on these deployments, you have a fair amount of free time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not all action. You're not always training all the time. You're just sitting on your rack, you know, catching up on some sleep or just sleeping out of boredom. But, you know, most of the time I'd read, and I'd read a bunch of spy novels like Le Carre, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Spy Came In From the Cold, the Carla trilogy. And so I'm like, this is a cool job. And you watched the Bourne series.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure you're a fan of James Bond too. And so like, I was like, oh, this would be really cool, right? If I could go do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is so far from the reality of the job. You know, so far from the reality of the job because, you know, how different it is, but it was just the idea of doing it was pretty cool. It was it was a mountain I wanted to go explore. It was a mountain I wanted to climb and see for myself. And the idea of working by myself unilaterally after going everywhere and work, you know, don't get me wrong, love working with, doing the FID mission, doing security force assistance, doing those type of things and trying to curb the counterterrorism, counter-terrorist threats that are out in Asia. But I really want to work by myself, you know, for once, just to try it out. And this was one of those ways of doing that. So they came, we had 2 individuals that came out and visited my battalion in Okinawa, and they gave a capabilities brief, which basically is like, you can be a human intelligence operative. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. Like spot, assess, recruit, spies. Okay, sick.
Yep.
Like, I like that. So produce intelligence. Because here's the thing about being a Green Beret, you get close to it, but you can't play, right? In a lot of situations, it's either authorities thing. You're not there to do that, you know. And as an 18 Fox, I got exposed to a lot of the human intelligence side of things. I did advanced special operations techniques course very early on in my career, which I like to call as more of an advanced recce, and you kind of get exposure to these things. And all of it is in support of like CT operations, you know, doing the job as ODA, working with guerrilla networks, et cetera, right? Expanding upon what you learn in Robin Sage. But, you know, the idea of like, you know, going out there and getting away with it, as I like to say, was thrilling, you know, by myself. And so they came, they gave the brief, and I put my packet together, I sent it over, and I didn't hear shit for a while. Then I interviewed, and I was there for about a week. Very intense interview process. Or was it 2 weeks? Can't remember. I did more mileage. I went around the globe. Like, I did more sky miles in that like 3-week period, because then I had a follow on. I had to go to Papua New Guinea for like a week. For when I was in, I had to go to DC to interview for the spy job.
Yep.
Then I came back, turn and burn, out the door for Papua New Guinea the next day. And I did so many damn Sky Miles, man. And it's a
Sleep
tragedy
scheduling
because
all.
it was like I was at the whims of the government, like buying my ticket for everything. I didn't get a cut of any of that. Did like 26,000 Sky Miles, didn't get shit. So like, but anyways, Papua New Guinea is an interesting place.
Mm-hmm.
But besides the point, so I was looking at getting out of the military in 2017, and I was married at the time, and so I didn't know what to do, but war was winding down. OIR at the time seemed to be like on autopilot for the most part, or at least as a first group guy, I wasn't getting over there. I put my name in the hat for a deployment. Best they could get me to was Saudi Arabia. I was like, no, I want to be in the fight. I'm sorry. Save that for the fifth group guys, I know my buddy Chris is going to be like, fuck you, Dave. But he, good friend of mine, fifth group dude. They reach out to me and they're like, hey, you got accepted. I was like, oh, no shit. And I was like, well, I was like already halfway out the door. I was going to get out in a few months. But, my wife at the time was like, well, what are we going to do about health insurance? What are we going to do about all this other stuff? And, I didn't really plan my transition well. Classic me, I'm just going to jump in with both feet and just fucking figure it out as I go. Trust in your own confidence, trust in yourself, kind of, I'll figure it out when I get there. Why stress about it now? I don't advise getting out of the military in that fashion. It's a lot harder than you think. But anyway, so I was like, all right, here's what we're doing. I'm going to do this job. I'll re-enlist, do a big re-enlistment, and then we're staying in for 20 years. That's it. We're going to, try for, buy a house, baby, move on. And, because my wife at the time, she was apprehensive about having a kid on the other side of the world. And I don't blame her. We would have had no support. No family would have been able, they're going to travel all the way to Oki to visit, so it's asking a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll wait, I'll be in DC, set up in DC, and then, we'll be able to plan from there. So that was the deal. And so I get over there January 2018, then I start,
So can I ask a few questions before we jump into there as well? In terms of that initial recruitment process, how much did you know about this unit area that you were applying to, and what does that process actually look like? Is there certain qualifications in terms of, can anybody that's had a certain amount of SF time be able to apply, or are they looking for specific individuals per se?
Specific individuals, with specific experience. There's several places you can go as an SF guy. This place is not a typical path. It's a completely different career path. You exist in a different ecosystem than people in the tiered units, but you work with them, right? You work together on a lot of projects and stuff like that. There's a lot of crossover in terms. It had a greater deal of autonomy, and that's what I was looking for. So you get the certification, right? And there's the Cat 1 certification, Cat 1 human intelligence. I don't know. I've heard through the grapevine they've done away with that now, which makes sense. You're either clan or you're not, So you're either trained to do clandestine operations or you're not trained to clan. Very simple, right? And I think that's probably a better approach, and makes the skills that you need to do the job, way more focused. You know what I'm saying? Going that route. But once you get your Cat 1, your Cat 1 hunting license, you're kind of a free agent. So yeah, the particular unit that I belong to, we worked in support of a 3-letter agency and their requirements, but I wasn't necessarily married to that. So I could go work for another 3-letter agency, represent that one, bring their requirements to me, and use that. So similar to like me picking up the phone and making that sarin gas thing go away is, we come back to what's in it for me. And the most extreme thing is that I have an operating directive that's pretty broad,
Mm-hmm.
also very strategic. I can go service that, with another
As
3-letter
needed.
agency or a covered unit or whomever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more, the way I saw it was carte blanche. You have a lot more autonomy to do the job, but it is also a lot fucking harder getting out the door, because now I'm in a position where I have dual authorities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just operating on Title 10 military authority. I have
Yeah,
Title
you were
50.
discussing this. We talked about that a little offline. Can you break that down?
So, right, Title 50 is, you have these laws and regulations that guide 3-letter agencies and covert operations and clandestine operations. You have Title 10, right, which is all the code, for military operations. But within that, there is rules for clandestine operations as well, and within a declared theater of armed conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Key note, and as well as regulations outside, we say ODTAC, outside of a declared theater of armed conflict. So let's just say every idea that I had, and exposure, you have a lot of autonomy, but everything had such extreme legal review,
Mm-hmm.
very, very rigid. When you work in clandestine operations in the human intelligence world, doing this sort of stuff, is that it's very similar to special forces, where it's a huge gray area. You're working with somebody that, has access to, this one. Let's say they have technical access to something, right? I'm talking to this person to exploit their technical access to a system or a database, or, something along those lines that, one of these 3-letter agencies would really love, right? But here's the thing. Due to the blending of disciplines, and the potential, let's say in that example, the potential exposure, right, of what could go wrong, it needs very rigid legal review, by Office of General Counsels, and so to make sure that everything is within, Executive Order 12333, Title 50, Title 10, and Proc 10, all these things that guide the military and the intelligence community. So yeah, it's complicated, to say the least. So getting buy-in, you could have an idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could have a source, you could have the best idea in the world, but if you ain't gonna get buy-in from OGC, you don't got an op, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about building rapport or anything. It's about articulating the means and methods of way you're going about it, so that they understand that it is within the rule of law, or the guiding principle, all these guidelines that we have to adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
So more autonomy, but doesn't mean you have carte blanche to just do whatever you want. I would probably say, if I could probably have like a borderline JD in this at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to push the envelope, you're always going to be talking illegal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to do right, you're always going to be talking illegal. And that's the thing. It's, I get really kind of offended when I see, people thinking that, we're out there just willy nilly doing whatever, and it's way more complicated than that,
Yeah.
but it's also streamlined, because say I want to go talk to this person, and I'm going to go conduct a bump. A bump is, I'm going to orchestrate a bump. So I'm going to go talk to this person. They're going to be at a convention, let's say, for instance, or they're taking this flight, and I'm going to try to get in that seat right next to them, right? I'm going to try to orchestrate, manipulate the environment to put me there, give me plausible cover for action, or, cover for status to be there to talk to this person, right? And then I befriend them and I build rapport, and then I get that second meeting. I'm not getting the intel on the first date. Sometimes you do. If you do get intel on that first date, that might be a suitability problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story I love to tell when I was at spy school is, you do an away city. So they send you to a random city that you you know, you may or may not know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say where I was, but I don't know shit. Never been there before.
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
And you're operating in a live environment,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And you're doing your trade craft. You're getting your rounds. You're honing your trade craft, learning stuff. You're running your asset. And so I was done for the day. And it was probably about like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I'm beat. I've been beating pavement all day, walking the city, trying to look for operational sites to do like a brush pass and a dead drop and, you know, the trade craft that you need for the operation that I was there for in the fictitious environment. So I just like go into this random bar and, you know, you're always like checking for your status because you don't know if you're being followed or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I go in this random bar, not planned, didn't even Google search it or anything. You know, you tend to stray away from using tech when you do this job because of the digital footprint that it creates or the digital fingerprints it creates. So I go in and, you know, it's an L-shaped bar. So I come in, I'm at the bottom of the L and all these seats are taken along the far side of the bar. There's one empty seat here at the corner, which has my back towards the door, which any dude, I'm sure you're the same way. Fair level of uncomfortableness with it.
You're not putting your back to the door.
But, you know, after the thing is you want to break out of these habits when you do it, right? Because you want to position yourself where you can spot surveillance, but you also want to make surveillance feel comfortable too, right? So not that I was operating at that time, but these are all
you're thinking
split. Yeah, you're always thinking that way. It's a chess game, right? You always got to think, and your perception matters a lot too, because if they're perceiving you that you look like a spy and not a tourist, then guess what? You're kind of fucked, right? So you're gonna get a visit. They're gonna put more people on you, right? So it's important to appear benign and normal. And let me finish the story before you definitely asked me a little bit more about that. But so I go in there and there's one gentleman sitting here and I'm like, all right, well, I'll sit one seat away from him. So I sit one seat away from him and he's there. And you know, when you just sit down next to somebody in a bar, they just want to talk. And that was the vibe. He had a laptop up and he was working on some things. And I order my food. I grab a beer. I'm sitting there, and then he does this classic thing. This is something I've done: is like use the bartender to engage with somebody that you want to talk to. Like you physically motion your body.
Yep.
And you're talking to the bartender, but then you go over to them and you include them in the conversation. And they're like, "Oh shit, I guess I'm in this conversation now." Well, like he did that to me, and I'm like, what's going on here, right? You know, but just a friendly guy. And this dude was slamming the famous grouse, which is like, I think I pronounced it right. The famous grouse or famous grouse. Pretty strong taste in scotch, right? I'll say that. I can smell it. You know, I'm a seat over from him. I can smell it from there. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'm in this conversation now. And so, you know, there's a technique called parrot on the shoulder, right? Someone's wearing, you know, if you're looking to initiate conversation with somebody, for you, for instance, I'd be like, oh, hey, you got a Whoop band. That's really cool. I've had a Whoop band, you know, and then we start talking about Whoop bands and then, you know, the conversation goes from there. So he has his laptop open. He engaged conversation with me. I'm free to engage, right? And I'm like, hey, so what are you working on? Oh, well, blah, just starts vomiting his life story to me. And, you know, I'm asking more questions of what he does for work. And then he just starts vomiting intel. But I don't think he knew it was intel, but it was to me. And I'm like, there's got to be a requirement for this shit. And I'm like, oh my God, right? And this is just a casual conversation I'm having with this guy. I'm trying to blow off steam. And I'm like, man, I can't catch a fucking break. You know, you know what I mean? But I'm like super excited because now I actually have something. And I'm like, is the course fucking with me? I'm like, there's no way they would have known that I just would walk into this bar and have this guy waiting here for me. There's no way they could orchestrate that, but you don't know. you know, you read stories about the almighty powerful intelligence community, right? So you just assume, right? So I go back to my room. I write this up. I write an ops cable. I write it. IAR, so intelligence report, encapsulate everything, you know, get all the basic information that I needed. And I didn't, you know, because I wasn't there to do that specific thing. I have the ability to get a second meet, but I didn't, you know, sign up to be like, shake hands, second meeting type
Let's
thing,
do it,
right?
yeah.
Because that's the most important thing that you have to do, is get that second meet. But I got recontact information, et cetera, right? And so I get back from the trip, and I was like, oh. So in the book, I talk about the gatekeepers. This story isn't in the book, but I love telling it. So I go, oh, I was like, y'all motherfuckers are going to catch me stepping, huh? Yeah, you thought, or excuse me, catch me tripping. I was like, you ain't going to catch me tripping, dude. And I was like, look what I got. Right. And I'm like, nice try. They're like, wait, you did fucking what? Right. And I'm like, somebody's got to care about this. So like, dude, no, that wasn't part of the course. So like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just was having dinner. This guy started fucking talking to me. I can't help it. Right. And, it was wicked funny, but it was like one of those like things. I was like, oh, you know what? I actually might be decent at this job.
What's up, guys? Real quick, I hope you guys are enjoying part 2 with Dave thus far. His story is incredible, and I promise for the rest of the episode, it only gets better. But I wanted to do a quick shout out to our Patreon. If you guys haven't heard of our Patreon yet, it's essentially an exclusive club you can join for just $1 a month. We release exclusive content behind the scenes on the podcast, and most importantly, we take questions from you guys and ask them directly to our guests, and then that is released just for Patreon users. We're just getting the ball rolling on this Patreon website, so if you want to check it out, be a supporter of the show, and help us continue to reach new great heights, check out the link below.
Yeah. You know, and
if you're getting intel on accident, it's like if you're trying to do it on purpose, just imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And here I am just BSing with this guy.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny because when you put yourself out there, weird stuff always happens. But the thing is, when you're working with humans, it's chaos. And so the more that you're out there, the more that you're exposed to, the more chances that you do have for like these random events happening. But yeah, it was pretty funny, but so, that was one of the things. But while I was there, while I was going through all this, and I talk mostly in the book, is, we moved to DC in 2018. And the deal was, between me and my wife at the time, was to start a family, or her get into a career or something. I was going to support her no matter what, right? And I had quite a bit of war money, as I like to say, saved up over the years. And I had enough for a down payment on a house. Whatever we wanted to do, we could have done it. And I was, there was like some hesitancy on her behalf for both things. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's just, we just moved back, this, that, and the other thing. But they tasked me like, February, they sent me to this like couple week training, first iteration of, spy training that I had to keep me busy while like, some clearance shit finalized and stuff like that. I was like I did all my human training the first year instead of doing part of it and then doing the operator training course that we have and then doing the latter half of it. You know what I mean? It's like front load it, get it done. That way, when I'm done with our OTC, I'm out the friggin' door. I got my hunting license. I'm card carrying.
Get me going.
Yeah, I get to, let's do ops, baby. Yeah. Because like being in student status sucks, especially if you've like been operating for a while.
I was gonna say, yeah, the SF guys just be like banging your head against the wall most of the time.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm ready to get out of the door, and I'm tired of being in all these fictitious countries. And so I just want to do the job, man. And so I come back from that, and work is telling me that what the next year and a half, 2 years is going to look like for me. And I'm like, all right, sick. This isn't bad. And, they wanted to put me in the hopper to go to the Iraq platform, the OIR platform that we had. I'm like, okay, cool. So we're looking at like 2020. We're in 2018. I'm like, hey, we should start trying now.
Mm.
I'll be home for the whole first year of the baby. Then I'll probably do a quick deployment, you know, and then I'll be home again. So it's like, I'm not going to be gone. Let's start trying now. And, you know, I come back from that training, you know, reference, and we're out at a bar, and I'm sitting there talking to her. I'm drinking my normal Belvini 12 year, which I love. That double wood, or as I like to say, double woo. And so I'm sitting there, I'm spinning the glass, and I'm prying, right? Because now I got a little bit of exposure to some of the, you know, conversational gates, stuff like that, and most importantly, asking people why. And I could tell with her physical, her body language that she was like just uncomfortable. I'm like, all right, well, what is it? What is it? Just come out with it. Like,
Yep.
you know, we've been together forever. Just stop bullshitting me. What is it? And she's like, you know, I don't really ever want to have kids. Not now, not ever. I want to keep traveling. I want to, you know, that's the life I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, all right, you know, my frame of reference is like, we just were in a foreign country for five years, 2 more years longer than I wanted to be right there. And don't get me wrong, Japan's an amazing country to be in. But, you know, for me, with the op tempo we had out there, it was fucking brutal.
Yeah.
You know, we were never home. So I was like trying to, and I'm like, well, you know, I was like trying to convince her otherwise. Like, I literally just signed 6 years of my life up to do this totally new career and everything else with the promise of stability to do this one thing. And so I felt, you know, I felt betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely felt betrayed. But, you know, at the same time, it's just like, I'm glad she told me instead of going along with it, you know, because I know people have done that too. And so at the time, I'm training for my first ultra marathon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out there, I'm running, I'm doing. I specifically, we settled in the DC area, and not far from my house was really decent trail running, and I was doing a trail ultra.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I hate running on pavement anyways. Like to this day, I always run on trails. Like pavement is the devil.
Cooks your lower back, man. It's the worst.
Yeah. Just, I always feel like 10 years older after I run on pavement, you know? And, you know, years of being in special forces will do a number to your knees, you know? So I'm out there by myself, and my mind's on repeat, dude. I'm just thinking the whole time, like, what the fuck do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just made all these sacrifices to do this thing, and now she doesn't want to do it. And I was like, do I divorce her? And then, you know, I've been with my wife for basically since junior year of college. It's a long time, you know, between dating and then eventually, you know, being married and everything. And so I'm like, I don't know how the fuck to be single, you know, like, you know, when everyone goes in their 20s, the average dude, guy and gal, you're out there dating, you know, you develop this book of red flags.
Yep.
I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any experience. You know, this is a brave new world to me. I was scared shit, dude. And I was like, yeah, a Green Beret, you know, being single, right? You know, scared of all this other thing. Well, you know, being alone and single, because the job's hard. It's a lonely fucking job. It is a lonely job. And finding time for somebody gets very difficult if you're a fanatic like me and you're committed to the mission. That's it. Like, so I get a phone, you know, every day I'm going out training for ultra. It's just like this louder, this conversation inside myself is getting louder and louder and louder. And, you know, we're having conversations, and I'm trying to turn it around. And, you know, she kept fixing it. Like, I'm like, all right, well, if we're not going to do kids, we're going to just get a job. And then she's like, well, I don't really need a career. We make enough money. I'm like, I took a 30 grand hit to do this job. You know, like, I'm not getting tons of deployments every year. You know, when we're clearing, you know, I'm easily clearing 120 a year. Just being an NCO on an SF team, you know, just from all the deployment money and per diem and stuff. So she seemed to fix her career highlights on very limited horizons, a bagger at a grocery store or a barista at Starbucks. And I'm like, we paid off your college loan. We paid off your credit card debt. Like, you can do whatever you want, right? And trying to maybe be a real estate agent, and then we'll do real estate hacking and investing, all these options of, trying to, all right, maybe, okay, we'll work for ourselves. This is how we'll do it as a team. And just wasn't biting. And so that's when I started to realize I need to, all right, this is not good for me. Right. And, we're going to have to go our separate ways. But what gave me the courage didn't come from myself. It came from a random phone call. Gene was a good friend of mine at Norwich, and he was a freshman when I was a sophomore. I was cadre for him my sophomore year. And this guy had all the makings of what could be a great general officer. Went infantry, was infantry, commissioned out of Norwich Army Department as an infantry officer, went to the 101st Airborne, was a Rakistan, was getting shot at for like 9 months by the Taliban in Paktika province, hell of a deployment. And was now in the 82nd Airborne, doing his post-company command time, stuff like that. And this guy, anytime he calls me, he always drunk dials me, 10 o'clock at night. Dave, I love you, man. I'm like, I love you too, buddy. Right. And anytime we get together, I spent a lot of time with him when I was in the Q course because he was stationed at Fort Bragg too. So we would go fishing, and remember at the time his wife deployed, and we were just drinking every weekend. It was just man town all time. But he calls me. He texts me at 8 a.m. He's like, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, whoa, red flag.
Yep.
I've never heard from him at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, hold on, I'll call you when I'm on the road. He's like, I need to talk to you right now. I was like, no, DC traffic. I need to get the fuck out the door right now.
Yeah. Right. Especially now. Yeah.
DC gives LA, Boston, and New York a run for its money traffic wise.
Because they all suck at driving, to be honest.
Well,
I lived there for 2 years.
Yeah, you have everyone from everywhere else, It's that's the problem with DC. And so he calls me, Gene calls me. He's like, all right, I don't know how to say this. You should pull over. And I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? So my mind starts racing. I'm like, I know there's guns in that apartment. I know there's guns in his house. I'm just imagining him, I have no idea what's going on, but I knew I had his back no matter what. And he goes, Dave, I'm just going to say this. I'm not really a man. I'm a woman. I'm trans. And I'm like, in those split seconds, knowing that there's guns in the house, knowing that I've lost friends to suicide, I didn't know if I was the first person called or the last person that called, and how many times he's been rejected, thus far. And I said, I blurted out immediately. I was like, Gene, no matter what you are, you'll always be a brother to me. And I meant it. And I was like, before you go do anything stupid, you fucking call me first. Right. And then Jean, she starts crying. And, she couldn't go another day without being true to herself. And here's the thing, the most powerful thing about my situation and comparing it to Jean's is that Jean was about to fuck up her life for her happiness. She was married and with twins on the way. Twin girls. This is a Ranger qualified infantry officer who went to Norwich, who put up this incredible act their entire life that it's about to do this thing. And I take Jean's and I was like, man, what the fuck am I afraid of? I'm afraid of a little old divorce. Jean's got some real mountains to climb. I just am seeing she's got some real mountains to climb. I don't have looking comparatively to my situation, I don't have a pot to piss in, you know? And I was like, but what stuck with me was that couldn't go another day without being true to themselves. And I think of like, this is somebody I trust, would lay my life down, on the line for, undoubtedly. And they would do the same for me. And I'm just saying, I'm just afraid of this little old divorce, right? It can't be that bad. Well, it is when you do a divorce and you go through spy school and a myriad of other chaotic things. You know how we talked about earlier in the conversation how much I was attracted to chaos? Well, it comes in different forms. So I go through the rest of 2018. I'm in and out of spy training, and I finish in December, and I'm finally done. I got my Cat 1 certification, and I'm like, thank God. And I come back to what is now my empty apartment with my separated wife, Oh, but here's the kicker. This is probably the most traumatic thing is, I sit down and I have the conversation with my wife. And I love that with some of the spy training I've had now, I think I can handle, I can broach this in a way.
Starting to use all the tools.
Yeah. I had case officer friends reach out to me. They're like, did you run your wife through a termination meeting? And I go, kind of. They're like, dude, are you serious? Like, I'm like, it worked, kind of, to the most part. So, so I sit her down and I was determined to be friendly, firm, fair, and final, which is, one of the techniques you learn. And so I sit her down and, I talk about her perspective. I talk about my perspective and I just, I said, this isn't going to work out and we should go our separate ways. And she started crying and crying and I started crying and it was a very emotional thing. And I remember, but the thing that stung the most was she got up the next day, left for BWI airport, and I never saw her again. Right. And after that, it was all through communication and then lawyers and stuff like that. And so, I got what I wanted,
Did you feel like you knew that at the time?
Yeah. There was like kind of a relief inside me. But then the hard part was going to begin. The hard part was going to begin, with the lawyers and all that other shit. And it's like, I thought it was going to be a very cut and dry thing. And it never is. It never is. Feelings are involved. Emotions are ugly. And so I'm dealing, every time I'm coming out of the field, at spy school, I stopped being Jackie Ray Biggs, and Jackie Ray Biggs's problems are done, and now I have to deal with Dave Fielding's problems, and so, and it was more bad news for my lawyers, right? And so and it was just, and I had to keep up with appearances of doing the school because I wanted it done. I think there's like an SF adage of like, when you do something that sucks so bad, you want to make sure you get through it the first time, because you don't want to do it again, and I think a lot of the times is like when you're doing the STAR course, you're doing land nav and you're like, I'm getting fucking selected because I ain't doing this again.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting my points, right? And you're just telling yourself like, I am not doing this again. Right.
I hear that the SEAL is the one where they take off their mask and essentially like drown them underwater. And they're like, they're like, some guys have failed it like multiple times. And they're like, it's the absolute worst to just have to keep doing it again and again and again. I'm like, I couldn't even imagine.
And all you want to do is like, I'm passing this the first time because I don't want to do this ever again. It's the same mentality. So a lot of that, you have that in, spy school too. And you're just like, I'm getting through this no matter what, but all the shit. And this is something, what I talk about in the book is that the negative internal dialogue started there, right? The whole idea of, I can't win. I can't win. I can't just be at peace. I can't just, these simple things, right? And that's a dangerous place to get into, because when you start looking at winning and losing in a divorce, nobody fucking wins. Everybody loses. That's it.
Without a doubt.
And so, there's an old saying, cheaper to keeper, amongst military men. But, if you're not, but here's the thing, you're not happy, like life's too short, man.
Mhm.
I'm not saying you can't work things out. But if you have very serious opposing points of view or visions, of the future, that's probably a point, you need to look internally. You either make compromises or you walk away. And what are the costs of those compromises? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So doing that cost benefit analysis, you have to do that cost benefit analysis, sort of speak. But where's I going with that? So, the internal dialogue started there. But, when I got back from spy school, they had these great things, right? There's called lead generation. So you generate leads and, those leads, you go out and you do bumps and then you talk to these people and you assess them and then you either let the relationship die on the vine or you move towards, operationalizing them and to recruitment and stuff. And so, uh, they have this thing at the time I didn't know. It was called Tinder and Bumble and
Yeah.
all these dating apps. So I was like, the leads come to me, right? And so then, my woes of my divorce were soon forgotten in me just going out and having a grand old fucking time.
Quick rebound. Yep.
Yeah. And so I end up moving to Baltimore, moving in with somebody in my squadron who was a year ahead of me, and finished the pipeline. I think was getting ready to finish the pipeline. They were getting ready to go to the farm, and he's like, "Hey man, I want you to can you watch my house while you're gone?" And while I'm gone, I'm like, "Yeah, man, I got it. Like, I'll do that." He's like, "I know what you're going through. I'll charge you $800 a month." I'm like, "Oh, sick. All right." So basically have this whole house to myself. I just got to look after it. I'm like, this is a good deal. But, little did I know though, everything that I was doing in my dating life became, was gossip at work.
Yep.
So I had people I didn't even fucking know that knew I was going out on dates and shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? It's not like an ODA team room, I don't know. I don't know these people.
And people aren't bullshitting with you too. It's more like all behind your back.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, Dave, how was your weekend? This thing. I mean, my office is literally a den of spies
Yeah.
in the literal and figurative sense.
Scariest place to work.
Yeah, exactly. So, everybody's going to figure out your business eventually at one point. So, I'm having a good time.
Mhm.
And, but eventually, I have to do training. So they send me to another version of SEER school, which is way more tamed than the Special Forces version, the SEER C version of the school. This one was more peacetime governmental type detention situations and stuff like that. And so, I mean, it was the same shit, but just a slightly different flavor.
Toned down a bit.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it was, I go to training all day and then I go home to my hotel room. You could do whatever the fuck you want to me.
Yeah.
It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be nearly as bad as the experience I have. Yeah. All right. Like, I know at some point that this training is going to end. Where at SEER school, it was like, oh God, at one point you're so tired. You're like, we really are captured. This is
It just tricked us.
Yeah. We really are captured. I'm not at Camp McCall anymore. I think I'm in some Eastern Bloc country. Right? Yeah. So it's wicked funny, but at the end of the day, I knew it was going to end. And so we would all go out for beers and stuff like that. And one of the dudes that was in the crew, his name was Jake.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this guy, but he was friends with my roommate, Richard. And so he kind of knew a little bit about me, my situation and stuff like that. And Jake was also going through a divorce himself, but he was an interrogator. Like his background, he was an interrogator within SOF, and done like 10,000 hours of interrogations and shit like that. Like he could read people. I don't know TTP's interrogators or anything like that, but there's a lot of crossover with that and human intelligence, and so. But one of the women that was there, who was our boss, was Gabriella.
Mm-hmm.
And Jake comes up to me. He's like, hey, she's really into you. I'm like, what do you mean? You know, because I'm like, oh, she's pretty hot, right? And so he's telling me she's into me, and he's explaining, you know, going like, you know, watch her. She always points her feet to you when you're in the crowd. She's preening her hair. This is an indication of that. And he's like, yeah, he starts breaking it down like, you know, like John Madden watching a fucking football game on Sunday with X's and O's. I mean, like a true expert. So I was like, all right, I'll start giving her attention and see what happens. And I'm like, you know, getting the feedback he's saying. So that, you know, this relationship, not really a relationship, but you know, there's some
tension.
There's some flirt, you know, went to like flirty text messaging. And then eventually, like one night we're there training, we're at the bar, she isn't there. I get a text message from her. I was like, hey, what are you doing for dinner? Right. At this point, nothing happened. Everything is just innocent. And I'm with the dudes. I'm with Jake. I'm with some other guys that you meet. You know, everybody's just like kind of drinking their beers, laughing about the shit that happened the day, the mistakes you made. You know, SEER school is a very humbling experience.
Without a doubt.
No matter, even though this was easier than the Special Forces version, there's still a lot to learn. Davey had a lot to fucking learn at that school. So anyways, like, she texts me, she goes, hey, why don't you come over here and we'll get room service? Whew. Bro, if you've never seen someone drop cash so fast in your motherfucking life, that was me. I was hairpins, dude. And I was like, hey, you gotta go, right? And they all like thought, like, they all knew I was like on the dating apps and stuff like that. You know, because they would ask me and shit, like, any bites, you know? And I'm like, no, nothing, right? Or whatever. And so you know, I run over there and we order room service and nothing happened. But like, there was like, you know, when we said goodbye that night, you know, she's at the door, I'm at the door, and I'm like, huh. She's like, huh, do I do it?
That
I don't know.
spark, yeah.
Right. And we're all like, all right, have a good night. And we're like two like teenage kids. And I go back and I'm like, yep, there's something here. Right. And then we ended up making plans to go on an actual date when we were back in DC. But then she canceled on me. And she goes, you know what? You know what's going to happen if you come down here. I know what's going to happen if you're going to come down here. We both know it. It was like, it's not good. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And this is what I said to her. I was like, all right, well, how about this? In August, September, when I'm done, how about I take you out for a beer? You know, because at this point I'd be out of the food chain, out of the training food chain. Right. And she's like, I would like that very much. And I was like, all right, sweet. Right. And yeah. But you know, this is what began as a yo-yo back and forth. Right. And, you know, I kept dating, and then I keep dating, and then I'd build up a Rolodex of women I'm talking to, and then she'd come back in. She'd come back. She's like, I don't want to wait. Right. Stuff like that. And then we go out on a date, and then she's like, I don't know. I can't do it. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, shit, I got to start all over again. Right. So it was like this, was just like this yo-yo back and forth, but I didn't know, you know what I mean? But it was like that little bit of chaos, that spice was like crack to me, you know, and like really reeled me in. And so I remember eventually she sends me a message. Hey, I really don't want, like, she goes on leave, and then she sends me a message while she's on leave. Like, I don't really care anymore. Like, I want to be with you. And I'm like, all right, as soon as you get back, we're going to watch Game of Thrones. And we didn't watch a single goddamn thing of Game of Thrones that night she got back. I'll say that. But at that point, I was in a rush.
Yep.
You know, I look at myself like, I had this idea. A lot of my friends around me already had kids, you know, and so I felt like I was behind. I had this like fear being an old dad. I had all these other things, you know, there was all these this stupid fucking internal
Quickest
dialogue.
way to get over heartbreak is to basically jump right into something new, but you never.
Yeah. I should have took the time after the divorce just to, the divorce wasn't even finalized yet. Right. So technically, on paper, I'm still a married man, which is a no.
Yeah.
Right. And so this relationship, this is one of the spicy things about the relationship was that there was that like thrill of the risk involved. So I like to joke with my former case officer friends is that Gabriella was my first Cat 1 source. And, like, and the shit that I don't want to ruin the book, but I had to employ, and this is one of my favorite funny parts about writing the book and just how fucking crazy I am, the length I go to for women in my life, is that like, people become suspicious of the relationship, and I have to use the tradecraft and skills the $1 million education that I got from the intelligence community to protect the relationship. And so, and it's really funny, but eventually it brings me to Iraq. So I'm dealing with this yo-yo relationship.
Yep.
Still dealing with my divorce. My mental health is in the fucking shitter, dude. At this point, Gabriella's got me wrapped up around her finger, not that like at the time I could see it that way, but obviously hindsight looking 2020. And I'm also guilty too, because I'm bringing a lot of shit into this relationship, baggage, projection of, wanting a family and all this other stuff, that probably wasn't, something that she was looking for either, even though there was some mental, as you know,
conversations around
there was some conversations around that would have me think otherwise,
Without a doubt.
But when you go through the healing process, and folks, you're never actually 100% healed. It's always diligent, consistent effort. But you start to like have a different perspective on things. And so I think of like, here I am. I just narrowly beat our relationship getting outed, through a clandestine hooliganry that I put together and spent a lot of money to do said things, And so I come back from Labor Day weekend thinking I'm scot-free. They pull me in the office. They say, hey, we need you to go to Iraq and Syria in 30 days. And I'm like, shit. Okay. Hey, probably, I'm not, I was slated to go in 2020. And there was an entire class of people like Richard that were ahead of me that haven't even went out and did a single op yet. And I'm like, what about all these people? And I'm like, I'll go. Green Berets will never fucking say no to a deployment. Are you kidding me? Like mission first, man. And I would never say no. But I said to them, I was like, hey, I have some shit going on. Like, I'm going through a divorce. It's going to go to court. And then once in November, it's finalized and I'm good. But if I deploy now, I miss a court date. I don't know. It's going to push this so far back that they're going to stop looking, there's an optic that they look at how many years of marriage.
Yep.
I tag on another year of marriage. That makes it look bad.
Yep.
They don't care if you were separated. They're looking at like married this date. Now we're at this date.
And pushing it back for like certain, for work and everything as well. It's just gonna.
Yeah. And so so here's the thing is that like, I am not with SF guys anymore. I'm not with SF guys anymore. I feel like the sergeant majors that I've had, like this is like, I'll quote one of them, the sergeant majors SF sergeant majors I know, larger than life guys, a lot of them. Right. And the reason why I became an NCO in the first place, I think about Shane Bailey, who he is. He was a master sergeant, larger than life guy. Some sergeant majors I had Sergeant Major Alex Ho. He was a Chinese kid that grew up in Spanish Harlem in New York City. So he'd be like, hey man, what's up? He spoke fluent Chinese and Spanish, but he'd be like, hey man, I got a deal for you. Like, he'd be like, who wants to go to Ranger School? Like, And I think of like, if I was dealing with him, how he would have been about it, he'd be like, hey, Dave, you're all fucked up, but we're going to fix you. Like, you know what I mean? Like it would have been, a more, they would have taken in the calculus. They know, and they know I'm not going to say no to a deployment, et cetera, right? But they, these IC types, not
A bit detached from reality.
very detached from reality. This sergeant major, he's like, oh, I've had a divorce before. It's not bad. And I'm like, yeah, what I wanted to say was like, well, when you don't fucking deploy, it's kind of easy to deal with your problems, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, now you're putting me in a compromisable position. Like, not that I said that, but because I'm a new guy, so I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say no. And there's a part of me, there was some things that happened with Gabriella where I'm like, maybe if this deployment will save, I'll be fucked with my divorce, but I'll at least save the one thing I love, the one thing that mattered the most to me at the time, which was that relationship. And so I started to frame the deployment in my mind. So in the moment, in the split seconds, all this calculation's going on in my head. And I go, I'll go, but as long as I'm the last option. And they were like, all right, yeah, you're like number 3 on the list. So I get a week. So like 2 weeks goes by and I'm like, my divorce is heating up. And I tell my lawyer kind of like, hey, I might have to deploy last minute. Things are getting bad. And we're trying to settle. It's going back and forth. We're trying to settle. And trying to remember. So it's all in the book. But they call me like a week and a half later. They're like, boss calls me. He's like, all right, man, you're it. You're the only one that can go. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? He's like, yep, that's it. What about my divorce? It's going to have to wait. And I'm like, all right, this is fucking happening, man. And Green Berets don't say no to deployment. This is it. And I start jumping through my fucking ass to make this deployment happen. Now, one of the dudes that was ahead of me that was supposed to go on the deployment that bowed out of it, I'm like in the office. I'm picking up the phone, making phone calls, trying to schedule range time so I can get, zero my optics, all the zero my lasers, all, my LA5, all the shit, right? Set it up so, my gun box is good to go, right? Do the qualification, all the other, stupid stuff that needs to happen for me to get out the door. And this kid's in the little bullpen and he's like bragging. He's like, yeah, no way I was going on that deployment. I already booked tickets to France with my wife for Christmas. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? I have never came close to blue on blue in my life before than in that goddamn moment right there, right? I'm like, the level of fucking cowardice was beyond me, dude, was utterly beyond me. And I was like, I am not around SF guys anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. There was some really stellar people that were in that unit, right? Definitely stellar people. Can't let the bad speak for all the good people that were there. Definitely mentored some pretty hardcore woodpecker lip motherfuckers that are rising up the ranks over there right now as we speak. So, but with the same mentality that I have, but I was just like killing here I am about to fuck my whole life up for this deployment. And this dude's getting to go to France with his wife for Christmas.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is fucked up. I feel like they almost like, well, like Fielding's marriage is in the shitter, so we might as well try to save this kid's marriage.
Yeah,
right? Like, oh, financial ruination? That's fine, And, so I literally, Gabriella's fighting with me because she thinks I, want to go on a deployment for the sake of, because I'm a junkie, like that. And, there's part of me that does, but, she thinks I'm like leaving her type of thing and, gaslighting me and all sorts of shit. And I literally have a fucking nervous breakdown on my floor. I'm like, I can't win with her, can't win in the divorce. And I'm just like, I just want to blow my fucking brains out. And this is the negative internal dialogue that was for a while that was gone, but just came rushing back to me in this crisis of a situation. And luckily, I talked to my mother, I talked to my sister, and they're like, just be fucking done with it, dude. Just be done with it. look at it this is like you're spending all this money to Ritter. So I ended up settling somewhere to the tune of like it cost me about $90,000, which was all my money.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up getting on a plane and on a C-17 to Iraq.
So before diving into that, I just want to circle back quick to training. Obviously, I know there's, especially with a group like this, there's very hush hush around like what you guys are actually doing with training. So you can speak to it to whatever level you can, but while you were doing training, was there a bit of a therapeutic aspect to getting into that character or role, or separating into a new individual, into a new thing versus your personal life?
I love how you said that. I love how you said that. Yeah, because it is a different character. It is a different role. You know, I think of people are like, hey, I took improv. I took improv classes in high school, right? Because I can't draw to save my life. So it was either painting or acting classes. And I was like, oh, I'll do the acting classes. And we had a lot of fun. And a lot of it is, you know, you do have to become the person that fits your cover. You know, here's the thing is that there's the truth, which is this big circle. Then there's the lie, which is this small little dot. And you're working from a place of truth in whatever cover that you're in, right? Or whatever your phony name is, however it is, you create a whole legend for that person. You create a whole character sheet, everything about that person when you grew up, you know, all these memories. A lot of it is rooted in actual real memories, because the thing is about being genuine and always coming off as genuine. People know in their guts when someone's full of shit. You know, there's signs. And so I think of, it wasn't so much of an escape. It felt more of a prison, because I was stuck and I couldn't move forward with anything with my issues, you know, but it wasn't like me being, and in the same token, it's like being back there and not at training, or not, you know, going through all the schooling that you have to do this job, was kind of like, you know, what am I going to do? Just be back in my house and just be stewing about emails coming in from my lawyers and phone calls, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't move that fast anyway. So it's like, I might as well just keep moving forward with what I'm doing. I would say though, the catharsis in some points for me, I remember kind of towards the end there, the divorce in August timeframe of 2019, was we went to this evasive driving school. So basically it's like you learn to race cars and get out of, you know, do J turns. You're doing all sorts of awesome shit, right?
Yeah,
like
get out of high tense situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll like they'll put you in a scenario where you're getting ambushed in the car, right? And you're like, you're down and you're just like full on the gas, and you're like, you slam on the brakes, slam on the, you know, throw the car in reverse, cut the wheel, you do a J turn, punch it back into drive, slam on the gas again, right? And you're like, wow, I just did that. It was awesome, right? You know?
Yeah.
And you're thinking like, man, if I do this downrange, it's a bad fucking day, dude. Like, you know, but doing stuff like that. But part of it was, you know, learning how to hotwire cars, learning how to like, you know, basically, you know, you're in a survival situation and you're attached. So we were like smashing steering columns and stuff to kind of get in the ignition to get past the computers and stuff. And I remember it was like one rage-fueled exercise was in this Japanese sedan. And the trick was like you had to like snap the steering column. And so like I'm like fucking screaming, dropping F-bombs, going ham on this thing, screaming, you know, screaming my ex-wife's name in vain. And like, you know, all the people I was with were laughing, right? And I'm like, right? And you know, I snapped the steering column, and the instructor was like, yeah, he needed that. Like, so, you know, you had these moments of release.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was just trying to keep up with fitness, you know, and this is something I talk about a lot in the book too, is that I was pretty consistent about going to CrossFit class. I always did some variation of functional fitness in the gym. And, you know, I belong to a CrossFit gym, or as I say in the book, a functional fitness gym. But I made some friends in that CrossFit community, and it was always an outlet. It was always an outlet, just to get that pent up anger out of the system.
Yeah.
And so fitness was always a easy button for me to just kind of stay even keeled. And that was probably like, what kept me even keeled in the most stressful situations too, is that I was always doing like some form of exercise just to kind of, take the edge off of all the crazy internal dialogue that was going on inside myself.
Do you think if we took the version of you that was going through Q school, so, like you were saying previously, didn't really have much in your personal life, that you were able to go out there and that was the mission, you were focused. Do you think that it would have benefited you going through this unit's like specific training, or do you think in like a weird way having that separation actually benefited you in terms of being able to get through the training and being kind of dialed in on a lot of it?
I prefer to just be separated because then you just focus on it, right? It's just like a deployment. And I think like one quote in the book before I went to spy school, right? And all the subsequent courses that came before it and after it, right? I think of like what was said to me was go all in on a deployment, treat it like a deployment. And so a lot of the times was that anytime I was at training, I treated it like a deployment. That was my sole focus. So I was successful, in that regards, because there wasn't distractions. Yeah. Was I still distracted by all of my problems inside? Fuck yeah, I was. It was on my mind. I had anxiety about like, all right, what ball of fucking worms or, what ball of chaos is that I'm going to have at the end of the day waiting for me in the form of an email, from my lawyer. I actually learned, like, I started developing anxiety with my phone. Like,
I feel that too.
You know what I mean? I'm like, there is nothing good that comes out of this, right? The only positive thing about the phone, at the time when I wasn't with Gabriella, was all the likes I was getting on the matches or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so I got a bad email, but hey, this chick wants to go on a date with me. This is awesome, right? So it's like
some positive,
some positive.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like, but going all in is the only way to really be successful at the job, because when the job is too fucking sacred to be half-assed about it.
Yeah.
And it does require all your focus. It requires you got to think about when you you go out the door and you start your day, you plan how you dress, you plan exactly what you're wearing, every stop that you're making that day to within 4 minutes, and to show up at this part of the world on the X, as we say, and you have a 4-minute window, whenever the hell that window is. There's a lot of stress. And the whole time you're looking over your shoulder, right? Not making actual, but you build your detection route to make sure you make natural looks, not unnatural looks, type of stuff like that. And so you're manipulating the surveillance team, you're manipulating your perception to the world. And a lot of that, you have to have the thought, you have to have certain thought, you have to think like the individual that you're being in. Am I going to be the guy, my chest puffed out, barrel chested, Green Beret, walking the block? No.
Yeah.
No. Am I going to walk like how I walk around, back at the box in Okie, or back on the block, as we say, type of joke, right? No, I'm not. I even think about my gait. I think about, these are all things, to manage that perception, to make you look more normal, non-threatening, and benign. And so the part of being in the military, and this is sort of the rub that, ex-military and CIA that go over to CIA to do more of the, national clandestine service, is that we have a fucking stink to us.
Yeah.
We do. We have a fucking stink to us. We do, like I said earlier, was like unlearning the habit of like facing the door. Some surveillance teams in some countries would see that as a very aggressive act, and dudes making eye contact, and with other guys out in public, not, it's an aggressive thing, but, coming from a full-on aggressive war. I have a PhD in aggression
Yep.
and male aggression, especially, so you're on an ODA, you got a master's degree and PhD in aggression, bro. Like, and you understand these nuances. So it's like unlearning that. So if you go over there, that's why, so many guys end up over in sensitive activities division because it's more the wheelhouse than the National Clandestine Service type thing, because there's so much, we just bring such a stink to it about ourselves, and it's the words we use. These are all threats to, cover and threats to the perception of who we are, and people pick up on those cues and stuff like that. So mannerisms are a big deal.
So looking at this specific group as well, we were talking offline a little about this. I've had Delta guys come through, we've had DEVGRU guys come through, and they each kind of name very unique characteristics that an individual would have to be successful in that role. What do you think, speaking for this group and something particular with you, do you think that unique characteristic might be?
You have to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be an entrepreneur, dude, like 100%. The mind of an entrepreneur, you always have to be hustling. You always have to be hustling. Your survival, you're only as good as the intelligence you produce.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're out there looking for needles in the haystack. You have to have a lot of irons in the fire. And that requires a lot of grind, a lot of hustle. Not only that, the same mindset of an entrepreneur is like, building those relationships, building consensus on teams, constantly building rapport with people in the right places, to help you out when you get, this certain case that you're working with to a certain point. You treat being in this job is you have a customer, and your customer are decision makers and also the analysts, because the analyst is going to analyze your intelligence, put it in their report, and then the decision maker is going to decide on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to be, I am of the mind, all steak, no sizzle. Let the intelligence speak for itself. There's a lot of people in the community that talk about great ideas for shit, but very few are willing to put action, rubber meets the road type thing. So you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to produce. You have to create things. You have to have creativity too.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking big picture. I know a lot of the stuff that I worked on. Yeah. All right. So for the audience, so I worked on a lot of big targets. Worked on Baghdadi, worked on Soleimani.
We're gonna get in that in a second.
Yeah, we'll get there. But there was a lot of other things I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on big picture. 3 to 5 years, where do we want to be? And you have to sort of have that entrepreneurial mindset. Yeah, entrepreneurs, you got to work in a team, but the great deal of autonomy that you have in this job is you're always selling. You're always selling your source.
Mm-hmm.
You're always selling your source. And so what are ways that you sell your source? Obviously you can't lie, right? Don't fabricate shit, but there's things that you have to do administrative wise to keep the case running healthy, right? So that's what I talk about with selling. So you're always assessing your source. You're always looking for new accesses, right, that they might have. And obviously constantly producing intelligence to justify the money being spent. Right?
Can you teach this, or do you think that this is something you have?
There's, I think it has to be, you have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have it. I'm definitely a product of my upbringing and environment. And growing up in a blue collar family, my dad's a small business owner, always hustling. 67 years old. You know what he's doing today? Laboring and plastering.
Always gets the job done.
Always chasing money, man. And so it's like, I have that sort of mindset deeply ingrained in me. And that's kind of like what's really important about it. Like you think about sort of, what makes entrepreneurs successful, what's a separator. And, a lot of it is that work ethic, that grind, and always hustling. So I think also for me, I was never satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I was always like, all right, hey, what's the next thing? And I think there's a mentality that a lot of DEVGRU and Delta guys would agree with. And I like to say it's a very, JSOC mentality is no one gives a shit what you did yesterday. We only care about what you bring to the table today.
Yep.
So,
like
and that keeps people humble,
Mhm.
but it also keeps the mission going. And so I don't think, I think it can be taught, with the being around the right people. And I've had the right mentors. I think I've been around the right people in my lifetime to kind of like emulate. But I think this is where I differentiate from a lot of people that work the job out of some people that you've had on here. It's there's certain functions of the government. You can be happy. I had a high caseload.
Mm-hmm.
And all the job, every time I was out doing this job, I had a very high fucking caseload.
Mm-hmm.
And most people would think I was crazy, but I could handle it, because I knew, if they weren't recruited or on the books yet, like it could not pan out.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to have 2 or 3 I was dating, and just see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the ebb and flow of it. But yeah, this nation's security is too important for, me to sit back and take a day off.
Yeah, just hang out.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's deep dive those 2 individuals that you were just highlighting. I mean, for lack of a better word, fucking crazy missions and targets that you're going after. Like you're just highlighting, this is the major leagues. You're looking at, 2 of hell on the front of newspapers constantly. And for Soleimani specifically is like regionally or even in the world, it's like the greatest rival in terms of this geopolitical chess match. So
100%. I mean, if you look at who is the greatest thorn in the Israeli side, it was him.
Mm-hmm.
You think about dragging us into making the conflicts in the Middle East worse, it was him. If you look at anyone that is an amputee from the Iraq war that survived, because of explosively formed projectile IEDs, that was him.
Mm-hmm.
And the blood on this man's hands there's a lot, he's one of the greatest special forces officers that ever existed because he had Ayatollah's blessing, because he was able to build counsel with other people. He was able to exercise patience. He was able to, influence the right people, Hamas, Hezbollah, support them with rockets, right? You've got Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, the Shia militia groups, all these things. The Houthis. Guy was absolutely brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And, should be modeled after. However, what he was doing was terrorism. That's state-sponsored terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
In these areas, right? We have these entities that are operating on their own frameworks with their own ideology with the intent to not just kill Israel and the Israelis, but want the destruction of the West as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this ideology isn't any that far off from Sunni extremism that we see in ISIS and Al Qaeda. And granted, the Iranians are very resentful. The regime is very resentful. I'm not talking, and here's the thing, key stipulation is that we're not talking about the people, we're talking about the government.
Yep.
And them influencing. What is extremely scary is that they have a weapons program, right? They're intent on developing nuclear weapons. And the reach that they have is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Now look what they are able to do at Hezbollah. When October 7th happened, Hamas, I was like, really, Tehran? That was my first initial reaction with that. And And now the war has spread out, and now it's going after Hezbollah, and the Israelis are going tit for tat with the Iranians with ballistic missile strikes and surgical airstrikes and killing their commanders. And Soleimani was one of the biggest belligerent and all that. Now, granted, like, yeah, we invaded Iraq. That pissed off a lot of people, for the reasons that we were there, the false pretenses of WMDs, et cetera. But, the level of pain that man has inflicted upon the United States is substantial.
Can we jump into the operation, I guess, where it all started in terms of, again, the way you highlighted in the book was incredibly interesting. I love it. It highlights, what we were talking about, how tense and complex these are. It's not as simple as, they walk up to you with a piece of paper and are like, we're doing this right now. It's like, so much goes into it.
So much goes into it. And, I'm only limited in perspective. So I know that first off, it's like, for the audience, had a very small piece of Baghdadi. It was advanced force operations, mostly, second set of eyes on the site, making sure things are okay.
Mm-hmm.
All the credit goes to the guys that did the raid and the people that found him. And, those two stories, I think that, the story behind how they found him and, where he was located is really interesting. It's a great story too. But, and the guys that did the raid, as well, and the dog the military working dog that was injured, that really did happen,
Mm-hmm.
So, it was impeccable. I mean, the balls that you had to pull that mission off was very complicated because at that time, Turkey invaded, portions of northern Syria, and we were pulling back. So if anything went wrong that far in northwest Syria, we were away from a lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
Or, the guys that did the raid were away from a lot of help. So, so with that being said, right, moving forward though, but like Soleimani, I was more intimately involved in making that strike happen. And a lot of, the J2, right? So, within the machinations of the machine, you have the two, and that's responsible for all the intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that person was a master puppeteer, because we're all working siloed there was probably more people that worked on it than, me and the other dudes that did what we did. And, and so, similarly to Baghdadi was that, one big thing that you do in special forces is operational preparation of the environment. And the more kinetic you get with an operation, the more refined your preparation of the environment has to be. So we knew that something was happening at the airport, and we're looking for all angles of how can we exploit this airport, right? How do we get more information? How do we get eyes on? How do we have greater viz on the planes coming in, other than ISR, but
Mm-hmm.
like on the ground, being able to PID, positively identify a target, right? So it's also, at the time we knew, like I didn't know, I was just told to drop what I was doing to work on this one thing. Now at the time I wasn't too keen on that because I had, like I said earlier, is that I had a million irons in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
This job is an entrepreneurial job. I just can't stop doing my work, and so for this one thing.
Yep.
And really it was just, my fellow Green Beret friend was like, no, trust me, you want to work on this. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's all. Say no more.
Yep.
And so he's like, hint, hint, you want to work on this. Okay, man, let's go. And so, I can't say much obviously and how it was done, but we knew everything that was going on in and out of that airport.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew exactly how it was going to happen. So, the VIP SUVs show up. This flight comes in around midnight on January 2nd. And I'm just bitching because I'm like, I want to go to bed. I want to go to bed. You know, I'm like, I don't care. I've seen a lot of Kill TV, you know, been on Kill TV. Like,
I know what's happening.
I know what's happening. I don't care. I'm just going to go to bed, you know, and my buddy, he pulls out a shitty metal folded chair and he sets it down and he goes, sit the fuck down. Right. And he basically was making me watch this. So I'm sitting there and I'm like this.
Pouting.
I was pouting. I was like, fine. Right. And, you know, all the ISR birds were on looking at Baghdad airport. So black SUV shows up, you know, as we assessed was going to happen. Individual gets off, gets in the black SUV, goes the route that we knew were assessed they were going to take. And somewhere along the lines of Route Irish, which is outside of Baghdad airport, which during the Iraq war was heavily targeted by insurgents with IEDs and stuff like that. It was only fitting that the finish happened there.
Right then and there.
Yeah. And so so just outside, you know, I was watching the ISR bird and then I saw it lock on, and then seconds later, it friggin' turns the SUV into twisted metal AGM 114, you know, right through the dead center of it. And my buddy pats me on the back. He goes, "Congratulations, you just bagged Qasem Soleimani." And we're like, ah, right? The Super Bowl, it was like we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It really was like, I mean, you want to talk about one of the most dangerous men that are in existence. You know, the level of nefarious shit that he is responsible for, you know, the arming these Shia insurgent groups, not just being a thorn in our side, but a geopolitical risk to stability in the Middle East being perpetrated by him.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time, and this is something I always forget to say, is that in the buildup to the strike is we were getting intelligence that Kataib Hezbollah was planning and staging an attack on the embassy. And we were afraid that was going to happen. And after the lessons learned in Benghazi, every single person was like, the fuck that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every commander's like, not happening on my watch, right? Type of thing. And so there was a lot of solidarity with that, but we were producing a bulk of intelligence that was coming out, you know, what they were doing, what their plans, munitions that they were moving around, all these things. And we were also setting up retaliatory strike targets too. You know, so we're not only trying to paint the picture, but we were also getting ready for offense too. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of the maniacal thinking of, you know, a bunch of Green Berets that I like to say, you know, with near, you know, the authority that we had, SF guys too. You know, we had other guys who were from other soft backgrounds and stuff like that. So I can't just limit it to GBs, but so most fitting that it was us that we did the deed. But and then the Kataib Hezbollah operative launched Katyusha rockets on K1 in Kirkuk and ended up killing a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we were on high alert, you know, for that. But then I just think, and I was working this op that I didn't know who the target was at that time when that happened. And I just think it's really funny that our response was, you killed our contractor, we killed your general. It's like, holy crap. That was
number
a real
one too.
Yeah. Not just any general, the general, you know, a guy that's feared and revered, you know, by all. And so, yeah, it was, I would say probably the aftermath of that, the general feeling from the executive branch or the top levels of, you know, the executive cabinet, you know, was keep your foot on the gas.
Yep.
That's what it felt like all the way. You know, General McKenzie was the CENTCOM commander. He wrote an article in the Atlantic, and it was kind of funny. It was like when he was like over, on the ground, we were busting our ass. But for him, it was just like a Tuesday,
Mhm.
or like, I think he was at like the weekend before it happened. He was writing about it. Like he was giving the ball at like a football game or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Didn't he give like a hint where he was like, "You guys be paying attention"? Like,
I don't know,
I feel like I heard that.
I'm just so far removed,
Yeah.
from any of that shit. I just know I'm like, wow, some important people care about what's going on here.
Yeah, I was gonna say it
And I'm
comes from the
like,
top.
yeah, I'm like, this is, I never had a reply from something within 20 minutes to a half hour of sending it up. And so anyways, like, me and the other dudes, we're working this, and, there's a lot of details I can't give. It's an expensive little operation to,
Mhm.
to do it right. But the aftermath was equally crazy, because here we are, we're sitting here. All right, we think they're going to hit us with 107 rockets. And it ends up fucking being a ballistic missile. and I guess, like, at the time we were like, holy shit, thank God it wasn't a direct hit.
Mhm.
Which, I mean, thank God it was. But then I watched the barrage they launched at Israel, and I was like, oh, we had it easy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we just had like one or two, um, just trying to graze us,
Mm.
so to speak. But and I don't know if that was a show of, I'm not an analyst, I can't say that, but we were there, and I remember Armin, one of my favorite people. Me and him used to compete over targets on this deployment.
Mhm.
So who was going to be able to bag this target or bag that target? And I'd work an angle, he'd work an angle, and we're just trying to compete him, like, who could get this guy first,
Yep.
right? And he's an SF guy, dive team guy, very competitive dude, right? So we had a lot of fun. But he was injured, and his arm was in a sling, and he's got kit on, and he's sitting outside, and he's like, and this is his fourth pump, and he's like, hey man, he's like, it's just gonna be a bunch of 107s, right? And he's like, I'm just gonna sleep in this camping chair outside the bunker. and we hear it hit. It's like a whoom, it's like kind of distant. It wasn't like
Mhm.
on top of us. And he's like, I'm like, get in, right? And he jumps up, runs in, his little arm in a sling, and his rifle bouncing off his kit, right? It was like fucking cartoon character, man. And we're sitting there, and we're all quiet. And I look at we had a couple very junior analysts supporting us. Like, it was like their first deployment. I look at this kid, and his nickname was Baby Miles. I go, Baby Miles, we're going to war, and you're going to be the first to die, right? And he was just like, really? Right? Because the whole night he's talking shit. He's
Yeah.
talking shit the
Feeling
whole
all
night.
hyped.
Yeah. And then the reality set in of what just happened, right? And it was really funny, but we were razor close. So we were razor edge close to war with Iran during that
Mhm.
time. Not that long after that, we pulled us all in the room, and they were like, this is going to be the team that's going to go across the border, myself included. And I'm kind of laughing, and, I made this joke back then, and I love telling this joke now, is I'm in the room, and we're all talking about, well, at least there'll be a book about us. Right. And um, obviously it didn't happen,
Yeah.
but the thought of doing that would have been akin to the guys that went to Afghanistan.
Mhm.
That mission would have been very difficult, would have challenged every aspect of my training, not just as an SF guy, but also as an intelligence officer, and kind of the
Did part of that excite you?
totally, because I mean, we skipped over a key part, was that, towards the end of December,
Yep.
that spicy relationship that I was in with Gabriella,
Mhm.
I had anxiety about it ending, right? And it did end. It did end. And I almost took my own life. Suicide ideation was like the only way out. And I was looking at, my pistol. I had a million ways to go out with a bang, literally. My little chew that I was in, I had grenades. I had my rifle. I had my pistol. Pick whatever poison you want, man.
Yep.
And, that conversation inside myself stuck with me. And, in the moment, the excitement of doing these huge ops was only, a Band-Aid to the deep wounds that were festering inside me, the conversation that was inside myself. So this is what I say in the book, is that the thought of going across the border and never coming back, or at least I'd die like a hero, is what I would say, instead of, the shame that we associate with people that die by suicide, and I was like, oh, this is my out. That was part of the conversation that was going on inside my head too. Obviously it didn't happen, because not long after that, we were compromised by a mole, Edith. And Edith betrayed us, gave us up, gave our sources up to Hezbollah and Iran. And, that is anything that could have happened to a spy on that deployment happened to me.
True. Yeah.
The highs, the lows, everything.
I mean, it's going to be a Netflix series at some point.
That would be cool. I'd appreciate that, but so it's, the someone that and here is like, like one of the biggest themes in the book is betrayal, right? We have my ex-wife. We have the friend, the betrayal of the friend. We have Gabriella's betrayal. We have the betrayal of Edith, right? If I didn't have the mission, I would have been dead. That's what I say in the book too, is my dedication to the mission kept me alive. And luckily it did, because I was able to do what I did a few days later, or a week and a half later, or whatever. But the consistent, theme of betrayal was just so exhausting, right? I was unceremoniously packed into the back of a plane and sent home. I was about 5 months, 18 days, maybe a little bit. I was just short of 6 months on that deployment, of doing 6 months, because of that. And then that's where the battle began. The real battle inside myself was getting back to DC, not being able to go home and see family immediately, but just dealing with my shit. And as I said very early on in this, in the beginning of this, I said to these guys, I said to myself when I came back, and I said, whatever this is, we're going to get through this. And I made that commitment to myself, even though that thoughts of suicide every day haunted me for a while, until it was like every day I was just trying to go back, right? And saying, where did it all go wrong?
Yeah.
Why did it go the way it went? I started taking the $1 million education they gave me in human intelligence and turning it against myself. And that I was trying to, get to my why. Why did I end up in the way I did? Why did I feel the way I do? Why do I feel the emotions I feel? Why do I feel this way about this, right? Sitting there and unpacking all of it, because I knew, right? And in the book, I'm not going to spoil it. There is a couple tidbits of, they're like, Dave, well, why didn't you reach out to be a therapist? Because there was some examples in the book that I saw people go do that and their careers were over, or they were dead shortly thereafter that. And so for me, I was like, I'm just going to figure this one out on my own and get to it. And I think really it was very arduous, but I fought harder for myself every day. Everybody during COVID during that time was like, I'm going to get a master's degree. I'm going to learn a new language. I'm just going to sit here and deal with my shit. that I've been fucking running from for a long time. Wasn't going to do another ultra marathon. Wasn't going to do, some sort of achievement to kind of run for myself in some way, shape, or form. Because that's what I look at that stuff as. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to deal with this internal dialogue. And I want to intrinsically feel good about myself, intrinsically inside, right? Not extrinsically from the outside. That's what completing another ultra marathon was to me. I want to wake up and feel good about myself. I don't need to wake up and do something and earn something in order to feel good about myself, And so it was addressing that internal dialogue every day and unpacking where it came from. And on this healing journey, folks, is that there's levels to it. There's levels to it that I'm still learning stuff about myself now that I never thought possible. And it's not just one thing, but I would say my book, if anything, is going to teach you the first step of that. And what I like to say is that I owning my shit is what I was doing. And what the ultimate moment for me was the realization when I was peeling it all away, kept unpacking it, was that I realized that my entire value as a human being was tied to the perceptions and value other people placed on me and not for myself. That's literally handing all your fucking power away. I look at like not saying no to that deployment. I'm always going to put the mission first. There's an element to that, but, I cared about my reputation. I cared about, I was a go-to guy. I want to demonstrate I was a go-to guy. That cost me dearly, in terms of money. And it wouldn't have saved that relationship that I had with Gabriella anyways, because that was, was going to take it was either only a matter of time before we were going to go our separate ways with that one. So I think of I started looking at myself in that way and a lot of decisions that I was making. And I kind of, I want to write another book out of the darkness. And because healing is fucking ugly, when you start fighting for yourself,
it's the hardest fight you'll ever do.
Yeah. And you have to fight against all these learned behaviors that you had over so many years, the things that made you successful, right? And the survivor mode that you were in, that I was in, for such a long period of time, not knowing that I was in that state. And so when you start fighting for yourself, it gets ugly. It gets really ugly. And I would say now, though, I'm probably the most truest to my most genuine self that I've ever been. But I'm still learning. I'm still learning. And that's the thing about people like yourself, people that listen to this podcast, people that watch this YouTube channel, right? Is that if you're a growth mindset person, you're always going to be seeking, right? And seek self-mastery. Do things that teach you self-mastery. Self-mastery, learning to control those internal dialogues inside yourself is very difficult. Carl Jung hypothesized that there is something called the shadow of the subconscious in our minds. And the shadow is the worst fucking critic we have. Now, the more we own our shit, right? These internal dialogues, these emotions, the sooner that we verbalize and put them out there, the sooner we can let go of that. We're taking control of things that we normally wouldn't have control over. And that, to me, is a level of self-mastery that takes a lifetime and needs to be in discipline and practice every day.
Well, Dave, my man, honestly, that's beautiful. Like, I really don't have much more to say with that. I know when we first linked up, like I said, your story and everything is just so inspirational and connects on so many different levels. I implore everyone watching this to go grab the book right now. Obviously, we were going in and out, but I didn't want to ruin it because, like I said, it's the type of story where you can't put it down. But all I can say is I'm really glad you're here, man. I'm really glad that you made it through all that. And I'm really looking forward for that next book. We're going to get you back out here for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you having me. I appreciate your audience. Please pick up my book, Into the Darkness, Journey of Love, War, and Emotional Freedom. I'm Dave Fielding. You can find me on Instagram, davefielding.dol, LinkedIn. Track me down on LinkedIn, Dave Fielding. Yeah, and I appreciate you and all the people that you had on previously. You run a really great program, and thanks, man.
Thank you, brother.